Malcolm's phone lit up between us, and another man's name flashed across the screen. I noticed because Malcolm had left it beside my laptop, close enough that its vibration traveled through the scarred wooden table and into my wrist. The apartment smelled of reheated pizza, fresh coffee, and the citrus cleaner he used whenever he was procrastinating. Under the amber pendant light, presentation boards covered every inch of our dining table. My client review was less than 12 hours away, and the layout on my screen still looked like an expensive disaster. Malcolm returned from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs. He saw the name, set my coffee beside me, then flipped the phone face down without answering. "You can take that," I said, aligning a text box that refused to cooperate. "I'm not holding you hostage." "Good to know." He leaned over my shoulder, close enough for his sleeve to brush mine. His soap and coffee scent cut through the stale heat from my laptop. "Because your typography already qualifies as a crime." I elbowed him lightly. He laughed, but neither of us moved away. That was how we lived. Close enough to memorize each other's breathing, careful enough to pretend we had not. We shared groceries, streaming passwords, and the narrow couch on movie nights. Yet if our hands met inside the popcorn bowl, one of us always reached for a napkin. If his gaze rested on my mouth, I found something fascinating across the room. Our harmony depended on dozens of invisible lines, and we had become experts at stopping 1 inch before crossing them. His phone vibrated again. This time, he checked the message. A small smile touched his mouth, then vanished. "Let me guess," I said. "Emergency. Dinner invitation." Malcolm lowered himself into the chair beside me. "Tonight." I forced my attention toward the bright grid on my monitor. "Then go. I can finish this." A beat passed beneath the refrigerator's low hum. "You've been fighting that deck since breakfast." "And losing with dignity." "Debatable." He typed a brief reply, locked the phone, and pulled my printed mock-ups toward him. "I'm staying." My cursor stopped blinking because I had stopped touching the trackpad. "Malcolm, you don't have to cancel a date for my project." "I know." Paper whispered beneath his fingers as he sorted the pages into columns. "I want to help." His answer was too simple to argue with and too personal to dismiss. I watched him mark an inconsistent margin with my red pen, his brow furrowed as if my deadline belonged to both of us. "Was it someone you like?" I asked. "Maybe." The pen paused. "But they'll survive 1 dinner without me." "That's cold." "They asked yesterday." He glanced at me. "You've been building this campaign for 3 months." The room suddenly felt warmer, though the window beside us leaked a thin ribbon of February air. Malcolm had remembered exactly how long I had worked on it. Of course he had. He remembered that I hated pulp and orange juice and needed the hallway light left on when I worked past midnight. That was what roommates did, I told myself. The good ones. The dangerously observant ones. For the next 2 hours, we worked shoulder to shoulder. He caught a broken link, rebuilt my budget slide, and ordered noodles before I realized I was hungry. Chopsticks clicked against cardboard cartons while an old soul playlist murmured from the speaker. At 11:43, I exported the final deck. The progress bar reached 100%, and Malcolm lifted his hand. I slapped mine against it, but his fingers closed around mine instead. Only for a second. His palm was warm and slightly rough. Mine went still inside it. His eyes dropped to our joined hands. Then he released me and reached for the empty cartons. "You're ready," he said quietly. "Because of you. You would have figured it out." His phone illuminated again on the table. A message preview appeared before the screen dimmed. "Guess I know where I rank." Malcolm turned it over, but not before I saw his jaw tighten. He had given up a real possibility to sit beneath our cheap kitchen light and rescue something important to me. As he carried the cartons away, I looked at the careful distance he had restored between us and wondered why a man who could have been anywhere had chosen, so deliberately, to stay with me. The refrigerator's hum died first, followed by the kitchen light, the air conditioner, and every glowing clock in the apartment. Darkness folded over the room so completely that I heard Malcolm set down a glass before I could see his outline. "Don't move," he said. A drawer slid open. Silverware rattled. Then his phone flashlight cut a pale beam across the counters. I stayed beside the table while he found 2 candles, wedged them into mismatched coffee mugs, and struck a match. Sulfur sharpened the warm smell of leftover takeout. The flames painted amber along his cheekbones and sent our shadows climbing the wall. "Building's out," he said after checking the hallway. "Probably the storm." Rain ticked against the windows, gathering into harder bursts. Without the presentation open between us, there was nothing useful to discuss. Malcolm sat across from me, close enough that the candlelight caught the fine scar beside his eyebrow. "What?" he asked. "I've never seen you sit still." "I sit still. You optimize sitting still." His laugh was quiet, almost swallowed by the rain. I turned the wax-softening mug between my palms. "Why did you really stay tonight?" His eyes lifted to mine. "You needed me." "That isn't an answer. It's the only one I have." Thunder rolled over the roof, low enough to tremble through the tabletop. I told him I hated blackouts as a kid because they made every room feel temporary. My mother kept boxes packed near the door whenever rent was late, and darkness meant wondering whether the electricity would return or whether we were leaving again. The words came out before I could make them lighter. Malcolm didn't offer pity. He moved one candle closer to me instead. "So that's why you always charge everything twice," he said, "and keep emergency cash behind the flower." I stared at him. "You know about that?" "I know you." The flame bent in a draft. His voice dropped. "My dad left without packing anything. One morning his coffee cup was in the sink, and that night it was still there, but he wasn't. After that, whenever I cared about someone, I tried not to become another thing they had to brace for." The rain softened, leaving the window streaked and silver. I reached across the table before caution could stop me, laying my fingers over his wrist. His pulse shifted beneath my thumb. This time, he didn't pull away. "Malcolm, I didn't stay because of your project." His gaze moved from my hand to my face. "I stayed because when you asked me to." The power snapped back with a mechanical thud. White light flooded the kitchen. The refrigerator coughed awake, and the air conditioner pushed cold air across my damp skin. Malcolm blinked, but held my gaze, the unfinished words still between us. All I had to do was remain there. Instead, I withdrew my hand and stood so quickly the chair legs scraped the floor. "You should text your date," I said, pinching out one candle. Hot wax coated my fingertip. "Tell her the emergency's over." His expression closed by degrees. "Nia, that's not what I was saying. You were being kind. You're always kind." I carried the mugs to the sink, though one flame still burned. "I don't want to turn that into something it isn't." Behind me, the second candle went dark beneath his breath. "And if it is something?" The question landed softly, leaving me no harmless answer. I opened my bedroom door, its brass knob cold against my palm. "Good night, Malcolm." I shut it before he could finish what he had started, but in the silence that followed, one question pressed harder than the thunder had. If his devotion was only kindness, why had I been the one afraid to hear the rest? The hiss of the espresso machine swallowed the first half of Tasha's sentence, while late afternoon sunlight flashed across the cafe windows and warmed the metal edge of our table. "He canceled the date for you, stayed up fixing your presentation, held your hand in the dark, and asked what would happen if his feelings were real." She slid my untouched latte closer. Cinnamon dust trembled across the foam. "What exactly are you waiting for? A notarized confession?" I wrapped both hands around the cup, letting the heat sting my palms. Across the room, silverware clinked against ceramic, and roasted coffee hung thick in the air. "Malcolm takes care of people. That's who he is." "Then ask him. And ruin the apartment if I'm wrong?" Tasha's bracelets clicked as she leaned back. "Fine. Don't ask. Give him something to react to." The suggestion should have sounded childish. Instead, it found the weakest seam in me. Andre had been the polished client liaison on my project, successful, charming, always immaculate in tailored suits. He had complimented my work twice and once suggested drinks after the presentation, though no actual date had ever been arranged. Tasha lifted one eyebrow. "Tell Malcolm you said yes to Andre. If he wants you, you'll know." By the time I reached our building, cold drizzle had darkened the shoulders of my coat, and the lie felt sharp beneath my tongue. Warm garlic and toasted bread greeted me when I opened the apartment door. Malcolm stood at the stove in a faded gray t-shirt, stirring tomato sauce while an old soul record crackled from the speaker. "How did the client meeting go?" he asked. Andre loved the presentation. Malcolm glanced over, wooden spoon suspended above the pan. "Of course he did. You built it." There it was again, that steady warmth that could mean everything or nothing. I set my damp purse on the counter and forced the next words out before courage could turn into sense. "He asked me out." The spoon resumed its slow circle. "Andre?" "Yes." My pulse tapped against my collar. I said yes. Dinner Friday. Malcolm lowered the burner. For 1 second, the blue flame reflected in his eyes, and his fingers tightened around the spoon until the tendons showed along his wrist. Then he placed it neatly on the ceramic rest. That's great, Nia. The record turned through a soft burst of static. Great. You like him? I had planned for jealousy, not a question that required another lie. I might. Malcolm nodded once, opened the cabinet, and took down a second plate. Every movement remained measured, the plate meeting the counter without a clatter, the silverware aligned beside it, the sauce folded carefully through the pasta. Then I hope you have a good time. I searched his face for the fracture Tasha had promised would appear. His mouth held its ordinary calm. His voice never sharpened. He even asked whether Andre was picking me up and recommended the Italian place 6 blocks away because their patio had heaters. By the time we sat down, steam curled between us, carrying basil and pepper, and humiliation had replaced anticipation. Malcolm discussed grocery shopping and a loose hinge beneath the bathroom sink. I answered in single syllables, listening for anger that never arrived. When his phone lit beside his plate, he turned it face down without checking it. Friday, he said, lifting his water glass. You'll look beautiful. The compliment landed with none of the possession I had tried to provoke. I pushed pasta around my plate until the sauce cooled into a dark red film. You really don't mind? His gaze rested on me, quiet and unreadable. You don't need my permission to choose someone, Nia. The words left no opening to retreat through. My test had produced an answer, and I hated myself for needing one. Malcolm cleared both plates while I remained at the table beneath the yellow pendant light, listening to water strike the stainless steel sink. He began humming with the record as if Friday had changed nothing. I took out my phone and opened Andre's contact, staring at a date that did not exist and a lie I now had to make real enough to survive. If Malcolm felt anything beyond kindness, he had buried it perfectly. And if he did not, I had just placed an imaginary man between us for nothing. By midnight, the record had stopped spinning, leaving only the refrigerator's low hum and the occasional rush of tires on wet pavement below. I lay awake beneath a cold sheet, replaying Malcolm's words until they lost all warmth. You don't need my permission to choose someone. Across the hall, his bedroom door opened. A strip of amber light crossed the floor, followed by the soft click of his laptop and the measured tapping of keys. By morning, Malcolm had already showered and dressed. Steam clung to the bathroom mirror, and the apartment smelled of coffee, but his blue mug sat untouched beside the machine. Early meeting? I asked. Something like that. He slipped his laptop into his bag and checked his phone. I might be late tonight. The front door closed before I could ask more. Over the next 2 days, Malcolm moved through the apartment with careful efficiency. He replaced the empty paper towel roll, paid his half of the electric bill, and labeled leftovers in the refrigerator. Nothing he did was hostile. That made every small courtesy feel strangely final. On Thursday evening, cold rain stippled the windows while I searched the hall cabinet for packing tape to reinforce a presentation box. A stack of mail slid from the upper shelf and scattered across the hardwood. Most of it was ours, an insurance notice, grocery coupons, a utility statement. But one cream-colored envelope had been opened and folded beneath Malcolm's name. I picked it up to return it to his desk. A printed page slipped free. At the top, in clean black letters, was the name of an apartment complex across town. Below it sat Malcolm's completed rental application. Preferred move-in date, 2 weeks. My fingers tightened around the paper, creasing the margin. His bedroom door stood open behind me. 2 cardboard boxes rested beside the dresser, flattened but ready, and the framed photo from our first apartment Christmas was missing from the wall. The pale rectangle it had protected looked brighter than the surrounding paint. A key turned in the front lock. Malcolm stepped inside carrying a roll of bubble wrap under one arm, rain shining on the shoulders of his jacket. His gaze dropped to the application in my hand. Neither of us moved. Water ticked from his coat onto the entry tile. You're moving? My voice came out thin. Malcolm shut the door and set the bubble wrap against the wall. I was going to tell you after they approved it. Because I'm going to dinner with Andre? His jaw shifted once. Because you chose to. It's one date. Maybe. He removed his wet jacket and hung it with precise care. Or maybe it becomes something good. Either way, I'm not staying here pretending this apartment means the same thing to both of us. The refrigerator motor clicked off, and the sudden quiet pressed against my ears. You could have said something. Malcolm looked at me then, not angry, not cold, just exhausted in a way I had never seen. I did. Candlelight flashed through my memory, his wrist beneath my hand, his unfinished sentence, the question I had abandoned outside my bedroom door. What if my feelings are real? You wish me a good time, I said. What was I supposed to do, Nia? Ask you not to go? Make my feelings your responsibility after you told me you wanted someone else? He nodded toward the paper. You made a choice. I'm respecting it. The application trembled against my palm. I had waited for jealousy because jealousy would have been loud, possessive, impossible to mistake. Instead, Malcolm had accepted the future I invented and quietly removed himself from it. His phone vibrated. He checked the screen. They approved me. A soft electronic chime followed, absurdly cheerful in the dim hallway. Malcolm walked past me into his room and opened one of the flattened boxes. Cardboard cracked along the folds as he shaped it into something that could carry his life away. I stared at the move-in date again. 2 weeks had become 13 days, and the lie I created now had an address. Malcolm. He paused with one hand on the box. I could cancel a date that had never existed. I could confess why I had invented it. But the truth waiting behind those words was no longer whether he cared. It was whether I had already taught him that caring for me required leaving. We need to talk before you pack another thing, I said. He held my gaze across the room, then slowly lowered the tape dispenser onto the bare dresser. Then tell me what Friday was really about. The tape dispenser sat between us on the dresser, its metal teeth catching the amber light from the hallway. Somewhere beyond the open window, tires hissed over wet pavement, and cool air carried the smell of rain into Malcolm's half-packed room. I pulled out my phone. There is no Friday date. Malcolm's fingers tightened against the cardboard box, but he said nothing. I opened Andre's contact, and the pale screen illuminated my shaking thumb. There was no dinner reservation to cancel, no invitation I had accepted, only an old message asking whether I might want drinks sometime. I typed anyway. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. I'm not available, and I won't be meeting you Friday. The message left with a soft whoosh. Then I placed the phone face up beside the tape dispenser. Andre never asked me out again, I said. I invented the date. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Rain tapped unevenly against the fire escape, while Malcolm remained so still that the room seemed to arrange itself around him. Why, he asked. No anger sharpened the word. That made answering harder. Because of the blackout. Because you said you stayed for me, and then you asked what would happen if your feelings were real. My throat tightened, but I kept my hands away from my pockets. I had hidden enough. I wanted proof without having to risk anything. Tasha said if I told you another man wanted me, your reaction would reveal how you felt. Malcolm looked at the open box between us. So Andre was a test. Yes. And if I had told you not to go, I would have known. His gaze rose slowly to mine. Known what? The question stripped away the excuse I had rehearsed. The room smelled of damp brick and fresh cardboard, and the edge of the dresser pressed into my palm as I forced myself not to retreat. That you wanted me, I said. That I hadn't imagined all of this. I gestured between us, too late realizing how small the motion looked beside the consequences surrounding him. Malcolm crossed to the window and lowered it until the rain became a muted whisper. This time, he was the one creating distance. You could have asked me. I was afraid you'd say no. So you arranged for me to answer without knowing I was being asked. His voice stayed quiet. Each word landed cleaner that way. I'm sorry. I believe you. I blinked. You do? I believe you regret what happened. Malcolm turned from the window, his face divided by warm hallway light and the blue-gray evening behind him. But regret doesn't make it safe for me to pretend it didn't happen. I stepped closer. Then don't pretend. Tell me what I can do. His jaw shifted once. You want the answer now? Yes. I love you, Nia. The city noise seemed to fall away, leaving only the faint scrape of my sleeve against the dresser. He had finally said the words I had tried to drag out of him, yet he did not move toward me. I've loved you long enough to know how you take your coffee when you're exhausted, which floorboard you avoid at night, and when to sit beside you without asking questions. I turned down that date because I wanted to be here. I was going to tell you after the blackout, but you closed the door. Then stay, I whispered. Please. Malcolm looked at my phone, at Andre's dismissed message, and finally at the flattened boxes waiting against the wall. Love isn't the only thing a relationship needs. His hand settled on the dresser near mine without touching it. I can't build one with someone who makes my feelings an experiment and calls the result proof. The cardboard box gave a dry creak when he lifted it. I reached for the tape dispenser, then stopped before my fingers closed around it. Preventing him from packing would have been another way of forcing the answer I wanted. Malcolm carried the box to the closet and began placing his shoes inside, one pair at a time. I told you the truth, I said, my voice barely carrying over the rain. I know. He folded the cardboard flaps together. Now you have to decide whether telling the truth once is enough, or whether you're willing to become someone who doesn't need a trap before she can be honest. The tape tore across the sealed box with one sharp rip, and for the first time, I understood that confessing had ended the lie without repairing what it had broken. Morning light slid across the hardwood in pale rectangles, catching dust where Malcolm's bookcase had stood. The apartment answered every movement with unfamiliar echoes. Cardboard scraping, closet hangers clicking, rainwater hissing beneath tires 4 floors below. I carried the last box toward the front door while Malcolm rolled his suitcase behind me. Its wheels bumped over the threshold between the living room and hallway, the same strip of wood we had crossed 1,000 times without noticing. The kitchen cabinet still sticks, I said. Lift it before you pull. Malcolm adjusted his grip on the suitcase handle. I remember. There was nothing left to explain. He had packed the blue coffee mug with the chipped handle, the throw blanket he always claimed during movie nights, and the little basil plant from the kitchen window. Clean squares marked the walls where his framed prints had hung. Even the air smelled different. Packing tape, damp cardboard, and none of his cedar soap. At the door, I held out the brass spare key. Malcolm looked at it, then at me. Keep it until your name comes off the lease, I said. I'll handle the paperwork. It was the first useful thing I had offered him that did not ask for anything in return. His fingers closed around the key without brushing mine. Thank you. I wanted to ask whether he would call, whether we could still share takeout on Tuesdays, whether losing the future he had imagined meant I had also lost every ordinary piece of our past. Instead, I stepped aside. Malcolm carried the box into the hall, returned for his suitcase, and paused beneath the warm ceiling light. Take care of yourself, Nia. The elevator bell chimed before I could shape an answer. Metal doors swallowed him, and the numbers above them descended one by one until the motor went silent. Inside, the apartment felt several degrees colder. I locked the door, then turned automatically toward the kitchen to tell Malcolm we were out of coffee. The empty doorway stopped me. For the next 3 days, absence kept ambushing me through routine. I made enough pasta for 2 and stared at the second bowl cooling beneath the stove light. I woke when pipes knocked behind the wall, reaching for my phone because Malcolm always texted from the next room to ask if I had heard it too. At midnight, the refrigerator hummed so loudly that I unplugged it for 10 seconds just to make the apartment quiet on my terms. The silence that followed was worse. On Sunday, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by the objects we had chosen together. The rust-colored rug, the scratched coffee table, the lamp Malcolm had repaired with black electrical tape. My childhood had taught me that homes disappeared in stages. First came lowered voices behind closed doors. Then boxes. Then keys surrendered to landlords. Then another unfamiliar ceiling above my bed. I had promised myself I would never again be the last person to learn that I was about to lose everything. So when Malcolm's tenderness began to feel like something I could live inside, I had demanded proof before trusting it. I had created the warning myself, then watched him leave exactly as I had feared. My phone glowed on the rug. Tasha had sent 3 messages, the latest asking if I wanted company. I typed, "You didn't make me do it." I chose the test because asking him directly meant he could say no. After a moment, I added, and if he said yes, I would have had something real to lose. I sent both messages before fear could edit them. The apartment remained empty, but the admission changed its shape. Malcolm had answered the question I forced on him. He loved me. Now his missing shoes, his absent laughter, and the cold half of the couch asked a harder one. If fear had turned love into a threat, what would I have to change before I could ever call myself safe for him? The low hum of the refrigerator filled the apartment, louder now without Malcolm's music drifting from the kitchen. Cold air brushed my bare ankles as I knelt beside the media cabinet. pulling out cables and old project folders because I could no longer stand looking at the empty shelf where his record player had been. A slim blue envelope slipped from between two vinyl sleeves he had left behind and skated across the hardwood. My name was written on it in Malcolm's careful block letters. Beneath it, smaller, for your birthday. Play when you're ready. Inside was a flash drive shaped like a tiny cassette tape. I remembered laughing when he bought it at a street fair, telling him nobody under 70 wanted their technology disguised as obsolete technology. He had smiled and slipped it into his pocket. You might. The memory landed with the soft click of plastic against my laptop. I nearly closed the lid. Malcolm had already given me an answer face-to-face, and listening to something private felt too close to another test. Another attempt to take certainty he had not chosen to give me. Then I noticed the date stamped on the audio file. It had been recorded 3 weeks before my birthday, months before I invented Andre. I pressed play. A faint hiss came through the speakers, followed by the clink of a mug and Malcolm clearing his throat. Okay, Nia, this is attempt 6, which you will never know unless I forget to delete the first 5. His laugh was quiet and unguarded, so present that I turned toward the hallway before the emptiness corrected me. Rain tapped the fire escape outside. The laptop's blue light trembled across my hands. I was going to make you a playlist, he continued, but every song sounded like a confession written by somebody braver. A pause stretched beneath the hum of the recording. So here's mine. I love you. My fingers locked around the edge of the table. Malcolm's voice remained steady, but I heard the slow breath he took before continuing. I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Not because I expect anything back, and not because sharing an apartment gives me some claim on you. It doesn't. In the background of the recording, a cabinet door closed. I could picture him alone in our kitchen, speaking toward his phone while the old ceiling light painted gold along his cheek. Sometimes you check the lock twice before bed, he said. Sometimes when the landlord emails, you stop talking until you know we're not losing the place. And whenever something good happens, you ask how long it will last. My throat tightened, but I did not reach for the pause button. I don't know everything that taught you to live that way. I only know I never want my feelings to become another door closing behind you. I thought about telling you on your birthday, but if you're not ready, then I can wait. I'd rather give you room to choose than make you feel cornered into choosing me. The recording ended with several seconds of silence. Then Malcolm whispered, maybe next year. The screen went dark. Rainwater traced silver lines down the window, and the apartment smelled faintly of dust, cold coffee, and the cedar soap he had taken with him. His reaction to Andre rearranged itself in my mind. The wooden spoon tightening in his hand, the restaurant recommendation, the boxes waiting behind his door. He had not been indifferent. He had been doing exactly what he promised in the recording, refusing to turn his love into pressure. I had mistaken restraint for absence because fear only recognized devotion when it arrived loudly enough to overpower doubt. Malcolm had offered me freedom, and I had answered by manufacturing a trap. I copied the file to my phone, then placed the flash drive back inside its envelope. No message to him. No plea disguised as an apology. Instead, I opened the acceptance email from New York that had been waiting unanswered for 4 days. The salary glowed at the center of the screen, followed by a deadline, noon tomorrow. For years, leaving first had felt like the only way to keep anyone from leaving me. Now the cursor blinked over the empty reply, and I finally understood that becoming safe for Malcolm could not begin with convincing him to return. It had to begin with deciding whether I would keep running. Rain tapped against the fire escape before dawn, each drop sharp against the metal, while blue light from my laptop washed over the empty chair across the table. At 11:47 a.m., the New York offer still waited on screen, promising a salary large enough to erase every practical reason for staying. My finger hovered above the keyboard. The apartment smelled of cold coffee and the cedar cleaner Malcolm used on Sundays, but there were no footsteps in the hall, no low voice asking whether I had eaten. I opened a blank document and listed what New York offered: money, prestige, distance. Then I wrote what staying meant: my clients, Tasha, this city, the life I had chosen before fear convinced me that departure was ambition. Malcolm's name did not appear. If I stayed only to win him back, I would still be making him responsible for my decisions. At 11:56, I typed, "Thank you for the opportunity, but I am declining the position." My pulse thudded against my jaw as I read it twice. The salary could have bought a cleaner apartment, a new wardrobe, and a version of me no one here had ever disappointed. I pressed send. The confirmation flashed white across the screen at 11:58, and the option disappeared with a soft electronic chime. I sat still until the rain stopped. Then I did something harder than sacrificing an escape route. I told the truth where other people could see it. I wrote to the friends who had heard about Andre, including Tasha. There was never a Friday date. I invented it to provoke Malcolm because I was afraid to ask him what he felt. Tasha suggested testing his reaction, but the choice was mine. Malcolm did nothing wrong. Tasha called before I had put down the phone. You didn't have to include my name. I didn't blame you, I said, rubbing my thumb across a rough chip in the tabletop. I blamed me. Silence held for 2 breaths, softened by tires hissing over wet pavement below. What happens now? She asked. Nothing I get to control. By late afternoon, the clouds had broken apart, leaving pale gold bars across the hardwood. I placed Malcolm's spare key in a plain envelope. Beside it, I set a signed amendment from the property manager removing his remaining obligations from our lease. No hidden invitation. No demand that he forgive me because I had finally done one honest thing. At his new building, the lobby smelled of fresh paint and damp wool. Malcolm came downstairs wearing the gray sweater he used to leave over our couch, but he stopped several feet away, his hands loose at his sides. The distance between us felt measured, deliberate. I declined New York, I said. His expression tightened. Nia, I didn't ask you to do that. I know. That's why I did it before coming here. I held out the envelope. I wasn't chasing a career. I was preparing another exit. I want my work here. I want my life here. Whether you're part of it has to be your choice. He opened the envelope, and the brass key slid into his palm with a faint click. The lease office removed your name, I continued. You don't owe rent, explanations, or a return. I also told everyone the truth about Andre. You won't carry the embarrassment for something I did. Malcolm looked at the key, not at me. Warm air moved through the lobby vent, carrying the mineral scent of rain from my coat. And the apartment? It's mine to take care of now. My throat tightened, but I kept my hands at my sides. If you ever come back, it won't be because a contract or my fear pulled you there. The elevator opened behind him with a muted bell. He closed his fingers around the key, but offered no promise. I walked out before his silence could become another answer I tried to manipulate. Outside, sunlight burned through the last rain on the sidewalk, and my phone remained quiet all the way home. For the first time, Malcolm held every key and every choice, and I had no test left to hide behind. 3 soft knocks crossed the apartment just after sunset, nearly swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator. Amber light stretched across the hardwood floor, catching on the spare key resting in its ceramic dish beside the door. I set down my mug and opened it. Malcolm stood in the hallway wearing the charcoal coat he had taken with him weeks ago. Cold air slipped around his shoulders, carrying the scent of cedar soap and October pavement. A cardboard box sat by his shoes, but he made no move to bring it inside. Hi, he said. Hi. My fingers remained curled around the doorknob. I stepped aside, leaving the decision to cross the threshold entirely to him. Malcolm entered slowly. His gaze traveled over the room. The single coffee cup on the table, the empty hook where his keys had hung, the clean patch of wall where his framed print used to be. The floor creaked beneath his weight. You kept the place, he said. I chose it. The distinction settled between us. I closed the door but did not lock it. He placed the box near the entryway and turned to face me, keeping several feet of polished floor between us. I listened to what you said in the lobby, he began. I needed time to know whether you were giving me freedom or finding a more graceful way to leave first. The radiator clicked behind me, releasing a wave of dry heat. I resisted the urge to explain, persuade, or fill his silence with the answer I wanted him to hear. Malcolm glanced at the ceramic dish. Do you still need to test me, Nia? The question landed without anger. That made it sharper. I could have pointed to everything I had done, the truth about Andre, the returned key, the New York offer I had declined. Instead, I walked to the table and turned my phone face down. No evidence. No rehearsed speech. No trap waiting behind my answer. No, I said. I love you. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but I kept going. I'm not saying that to make you stay. I'm not asking you to reward me because I finally did what I should have done from the beginning. If you leave tonight, I'll accept it. I'll still be sorry. I'll still love you. and I won't turn your choice into proof that I was foolish to tell the truth. Somewhere outside, tires whispered over damp asphalt. Malcolm lowered his eyes, and his thumb traced the worn edge of the key in his palm. What changed? I stopped asking how to keep someone from abandoning me. My voice shook once. I let it. I started asking whether I could become someone who doesn't abandon herself or punish another person for having a choice. He looked at me then. The hallway light outlined one side of his face while the apartment's warm glow softened the other. In New York, it was a good job. It wasn't my life. And if I say no? I drew a slow breath through the smell of cooling coffee and old wood. Then no is the truth, and I'll survive hearing it. Malcolm crossed the space between us, but stopped before touching me. I don't want to move back in as your roommate. My stomach dropped, yet I nodded. Okay, Nia. A small, incredulous laugh escaped him. Then he reached for my hand, warm fingers closing carefully around mine. I want to come back as the man who loves you, but not to the old arrangement. No guessing, no tests. If we're scared, we say it. If we need space, we ask for it. If something hurts, we don't build a stage and wait for the other person to perform. Yes, I whispered. Not because I passed tonight. No, his thumb moved across my knuckles. Because you finally let me choose, and because I'm choosing you. Malcolm returned the spare key to the ceramic dish. Then he bent, lifted the cardboard box, and carried it past me into the apartment. Inside were his framed print, 2 chipped blue mugs, and the green blanket we used to fight over on cold movie nights. I took one side of the box, and together we carried it toward the living room. Nothing had reset. What we built next would require apologies without bargains, questions without hidden answers, and love offered without guarantees. Malcolm hung his key beside mine, and when the 2 pieces of metal touched with a clear, bright sound, home was no longer the place I feared losing. It was the life we had both freely chosen to build.